Thank you all today for joining us for this session. We're going to talk a little bit about the option of a la carte for for higher education. But I just want to start by introducing myself. I'm Vanessa Miller. I'm a reporter with the Gazette. I've been here since 2011. I've been covering higher education since 2013. And we're actually just going to start today's discussion with a thank you to our sponsor, Kirkwood Community College, and also a brief video I think we're going to share.
Hello, I'm Dr. Lori Sundberg. I'm president of Kirkwood Community College, and I'd like to welcome you to the Iowa Ideas in-depth look at higher education this week. Kirkwood is proud to be a sponsor of this event. Kirkwood has been serving this region for 50 years, and I know that we're going to be serving for 50 more years. As you think about your higher education needs, or even continuing education needs, I hope that you'll think of Kirkwood. Again, welcome to the event, and I hope you enjoy the presentations.
Great. Well, again, so today we're going to dive deeper into this issue that's been sort of bubbling beneath the surface of our hyper-competitive higher education landscape for years. Collaboration, cooperation, partnerships across all the different types of university and college campuses we have, from publics to privates to community colleges. With so many challenges regarding enrollment and funding and shifting student demands, is that the path forward? Is our future higher education landscape one in which students can sort of shop courses a la carte, signing up for a course here or a course there? How would that work, or would it? Is there a different collaborative model that's more likely in the near or immediate future? We're going to dig into these questions with our panel of speakers, who I'm going to introduce now, and then I'll allow them just to also give some brief remarks before we dive in with questions. At the end of the discussion, I just want to note, I'll ask them any questions that you guys have. So feel free to send those over the chat function as they come to you throughout the discussion, and then I'll pose them near the end. So first, we have Iowa Wesleyan President Christine Plunkett. She was appointed the 30th president of the 180-year-old private liberal arts university in 2019, after arriving first at the institution in 2015 as its vice president for finance and treasurer. I should know she's the first female president for the school, and her financial skills have been particularly important as the college in recent years navigated significant financial challenges, as many small rural colleges have. As part of its path out of that, Iowa Wesleyan recently announced a new collaboration with Southeastern Community College, which I'll let her talk about in a little bit here. Next, we have Dr. Liang Chee. He's president of Northeast Iowa Community College. Dr. Wee was appointed in 2011 to the community college that has two main campuses in Kalmar and Piasta. It serves Dubuque and Alameda counties, among others. Northeast, like most other community colleges, has a long list of transfer agreements with many public and private colleges and universities for students seeking four-year degrees. And then we also have University of Iowa student Regan Smock. She's a third-year student studying sociology and Spanish from Coggan, Iowa. Right now, she's serving as Director of Academic Affairs for the UI Undergraduate Student Government. And we're just so excited to have her here today to share her thoughts and insights about what students these days are really looking for in their higher ed pursuits. So yeah, we can just jump in and let them share a little bit. Let's start, if that's okay with you, President Plunkett.
Thank you very much, Vanessa, and thank you for asking me to join you today. Yes, you've pretty much given the introduction of my background. I've been here, this is the end of my 6th year and my 2nd year as president. And as many people know from following us perhaps in the media, we have been navigating very typical financial challenges for small private institutions over the last really probably decade. And one of the things we've really come to believe as we look into the future and the changing demographics, not only the way that students like to pursue their studies, but also the number of students that there will be. There's going to be a decline in the number of graduating high school students, and probably more colleges than there are going to be needed for students. And so I think some form of collaboration partnership is going to be necessary moving forward. And we're really excited about our process and our announced partnership with Southeastern Community College. It has a lot of pieces came together here. This is partly about improving academic opportunity for students in the region. And it's also very much about serving the economic landscape of Southeast Iowa. I'm going to be as brief as I can, but we have found that there is a real workforce shortage in Southeast Iowa. Local employers tell us there are not enough qualified applicants for their open positions. So we're hoping to work together with them to develop programs, academic programs, and pathways that will lead directly into the workforce. We're also hoping, we realized in our due diligence that Southeastern Community College, about 30% of their entering students indicate a wish to eventually pursue a bachelor's degree. And only about half of them do that. So part of our initiative here is to explore what are the blocks that are getting in their way and how can we facilitate allowing them to reach their goal of a bachelor's degree. And I'll be happy to answer more questions as we go along, but it's a unique partnership where we formed a separate entity called the Southeast Iowa Higher Education Alliance, and our two institutions are the two members. We've already begun some shared staffing positions, and we have a lot of creative ideas that we're going to be pursuing.
Great, thanks. And then Dr. Wee, why don't you go next?
Well, good afternoon to everybody. Northeast Iowa Community College, we are 55 years old. You know, compare with our colleague in Iowa Wesleyan, we are definitely the young kid on the block. One of the things that people may not know is that we are an open access institution. That means we don't have basic requirements that people have to meet. We welcome anybody walking through our doors. And one of the things that we do as a college is meet people where they are and figure out where they want to go. This particular topic is very timely simply because of the diversity of people who walk through our doors. So we have to come up with solutions to get there from point A to point B. Some of them want to have a short-term training so that they can get into the workforce. How do we do that? And we also have people who want to get a 2-year degree and get into the workforce. How do we get them to do that? And then we have those who would love to go to a 4 years. How do we get them to do that? It's that simple and that complicated. We have people who walk through our doors who could not read or write. And we also work with immigrants. We also work with people who have just been released from jail. We work with single parents. So you find that our environment is very much this type of conversation. We never know what is going to happen one day to the next. And the other thing also is meeting the needs of our business and industry. How do we pay attention to their needs, and how do we adjust our curriculum so that our students are ready for that? So I really welcome this conversation. We cover 5,000 square miles. That's a very wide territory in the northeast corner of Iowa. And we border the state of Minnesota, Illinois, and Wisconsin. So whatever they do, we have to pay attention to it. And not only that, even though we are a college of the community, we pay attention to global competition. We don't prepare our students just for the regional need. Our students, just like the company hire them, are competing globally. So as a college, when you talk about options, when you talk about coming up with solution, that's part of what we do day in and day out. Thank you for the opportunity to be here.
Yeah, thanks again. That's so interesting. Yeah, and then Regan, yeah, go ahead.
Hi all, my name is Regan Smock. Like Vanessa said, I'm the Director of Academic Affairs and the Undergraduate Student Government at the University of Iowa. So I represent about 24,000 students when I'm in some rooms, which is a big responsibility. But I would say when people ask me what I do in that job, I break it down to making the academic sphere more accessible, equitable, and affordable. So we do a lot of projects around making sure students can gain access to textbooks and afford them, making sure that students are treated fairly in the classroom, and making sure students, most importantly, can navigate higher education, especially targeting students of color, students who come from low income, and students who are first generation. So I'm really excited to hear about this conversation and understand how we can make it as accessible as possible to go to college and make sure students know how to navigate that.
Awesome, great. Well, thank you guys again for being here. And I just want to start with kind of a scene setting question about where the landscape of collaboration and cooperation was maybe before the pandemic, back in 2019. What was it like then, and where was it going, in your opinion?
I would say, I think the landscape for collaboration, the need for beginning to look towards that was already well established before COVID. I think that became clear. It really ties back to the economic decline in 2008, where demographic studies show that the birth rate dropped significantly. And if you look at 2008 and you add 18 years, then you'll see that in 2026, the number of high school graduates will begin to, and it probably already has begun, but will decline significantly. And so most institutions were aware of that well before COVID. And I think the beginning to look forward to the need to have more partnerships, more collaborations, ways to work together was already there. But clearly, we have learned so many lessons from COVID, good and bad. We've learned that we can teach online and students can learn online. We've also learned, as Regan can probably speak to, the downsides of that. Iowa Wesleyan serves a very large number of first generation, low income, non-white. We're one of the most diverse campuses in the state, and one of the lowest income. So when you look at all those factors, online learning has a lot of challenges, expense challenges, preparation, all kinds of aspects. So I think it's been there all along, and COVID has absolutely thrown a new little angle into it.
Yeah.
And in terms of Northeast Iowa Community College, we have always been a partner. Education is not, how should I say, a work in isolation. We have 24 high school districts in our area, and we work with them to provide opportunities to our young learners. Whether they come to NICC or not, that's not the point. The key thing is that in the rural area of Iowa, how do we come together to provide more opportunities to our learners? We even share staff. For example, our chemistry faculty, he teaches at the high school and also with us. So that's one. The other thing that we also do is partner with a nonprofit in our area. What are some of the mission that they have? So for example, the Fountain of Youth in Dubuque, they really work with people asking for a second chance. What does that mean? So for us, partnership before COVID already exists with our nonprofit, the United Way in our area, and definitely the foundation. And in terms of four-year, just like our Wesleyan, we have lots of agreement. Make it easy for people to transfer. One of the things that is most frustrating sometime in the education arena is credits from one college is not accepted by another. And so when we talk about barriers, it's self-created. And for some of our vulnerable population students, they may lack the ability to advocate for themselves. So when they arrive at the other institution without the agreement, sometimes the message sent is that you're not welcome. So what is one of the possibility? They drop out. So for us as a college, having the agreement is to do the work on behalf of our student so that we can actually say that the access is equitable, as Regan said. So, and then in terms of businesses, even before COVID, every program we have has an advisory committee, and the advisory committee is comprised of people from the businesses. So they actually look at our curriculum. We review a group of our curriculum every year. so that we can be quick to adjust, because the competitive environment in the business changes all the time. So as a community college before COVID, the collaboration is already there. During COVID, we had to pivot.
Mhm.
All right. So when we look at our vulnerable population, is access to education still there? Sometimes the answer is no. Why? Because they got laid off. Number two, they don't have the technology at home. Number three, they couldn't pay for childcare. Number four, they lack, transportation.
Yeah.
So those are the things that when we talk about access to education, it's not just about us, it's about looking at the holistic picture of the learner and say, yes, we are here, but what stands in our way of success? So as a college, we collaborate even more during COVID because we realize some of those barriers are so real. If you look at the data, the population that's most vulnerable are the ones that are not engaged in education right now. How do we get them back into the arena? And how does it actually impact also the mental health during this time?
Right.
Complicated.
Very. I mean, and you kind of jumped into this. I'm wondering how did COVID accelerate these this need for partnerships, or the actual partnerships, or how did it affect them at all?
I think it shines a brighter light to say, how can we do even more? How we communicate even more. So for our college, for example, when we had to transition last March to more of a remote learning, our colleagues call every student. We find out what is happening in your life. It's not just about taking classes, but what's impacting you. And then we connect with our partners if we don't have the services to basically make sure that those folks are lifted up. So I think COVID actually reaffirms a lot of things that we need to do even more. It also reaffirms how vulnerable many of our populations are. Single parent, how do we get them? And research shows that during COVID, the people that actually drop out of the workforce more is the female gender than the male. How do we get them back? And so I think COVID, all of us are impacted. It actually it makes us be honest about what works. It makes us honest about partnership. It also makes us look at what needs to be even better. So we talk about technology. When we call our students, some of them don't have internet at home. So you provide the internet, they may have 3 or 4 people needing to use that device. Now, how do you do that? So those are the things that make us even more appreciative of the support network that needs to be there in order for learning to occur.
Sure. Do any of you think that the move online and the increased use of technology made partnerships easier between the campuses?
Yeah, for me, definitely. I would say prior to COVID, my answer to that question would be there isn't a ton of overlap between, and their strongest is probably between a community college and the University of Iowa. Like I know many students get an associate's degree and then come to Iowa, and it transfers really well from like Kirkwood or other community colleges. But one example of, I think we've just learned so much about what technology can do. And just within student government, we have started communicating with Iowa State and you and I so much more strongly because all of a sudden we have this technology. I don't think I knew about Zoom before COVID. I know it existed, but to sit in a Zoom room, but nonetheless, and be able to see each other's faces and do advocacy that way, I think we're learning a lot about what we can do in the way that it will impact. And I think it totally carries over to the academic side as well.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm wondering, so we're talking about collaborations and partnerships and transfer agreements. Do you guys ever see the higher education space getting to a place where students could not fully enroll in one college or another, but could enroll in one class or another, you know, with it, and then jump and put together sort of like a collage of courses from all sorts of different types of institutions? Is that ever something you see happening?
That's certainly a possibility, but my experience is mostly with small private institutions where our populations of students are really seeking that residential campus environment. They're seeking the whole experience that goes with that, whether it's athletics, whether it's singing in the choir, whether it's getting to know their faculty members really intimately on a campus where you only have 600 or 700 students. Really everyone knows one another. And so I certainly can see the opportunities for what you've talked about, but I also think it's going to be a while before you will see the disappearance of the standard practice of enrolling at a campus, because again, students are seeking that connection, they're seeking those kinds of relationships. But I would also point out that really the kinds of flexibility and collaboration between campuses has in some ways existed for many years. As Dr. Wee referenced, articulation agreements, as we call them, between community colleges and four-year institutions, those have always been there. They haven't necessarily always been managed or utilized in the ways they could be, but they've existed for many years where transfer credits will be accepted by the four-year institution. And then I would also say, some of these partnerships between larger institutions have also existed for many years. They're less common, but when we formed our partnership with Southeastern, we used as part of our example a very different environment, a very urban environment, but the Colleges of the Fenway in Boston is an organization that's been in place for about 25 years. It's 5 colleges, and they promote themselves. Their tagline is something like 5 colleges, 50,000 courses. And students at any one of those 5 colleges can take credits at any of the 5 in a very seamless way, almost like it's one entity. And I think that's touching more on what you're asking about. Students may still be enrolled at one of those 5, but they see it as a single entity where they can cross-register for many, many courses. And that's part of what we would be striving to do with our partnership.
Yeah, that's such a good point. I just thinking about, I mean, maybe Regan can speak to this, but that desire to be on campus is, as I understand it, pretty strong. Is that right?
Oh, totally. I would add, Christine, that was beautifully said. But I would add that one concern I have about this kind of, I think we would have to do a lot of infrastructure change around accessibility to every college uses a different interface to do your assignments and to pay your tuition. And there would have to be some serious investment, I think, at a state level to unify a certain amount of colleges. I would love to do research on that university because that sounds so cool. Because I do think that we have 3 really strong state institutions and tons of private schools and community colleges who specialize in really niche areas. I know students who have transferred because they just can't take a graphic or they can't take a design class at Iowa, and being able to stay at the university and the community that you want, but take classes, I think does increase accessibility in a way, but we would have to work really hard to make sure that it's easy to navigate.
It's such a good point about the technology, because even in our very small little partnership with Southeastern, we have different admissions, software that we use. We have different course software, and already needing to begin those discussions of how do we make it a little bit more seamless over the coming years.
Yeah, that is a great point. Sorry, go ahead, Dr. Wee.
Oh, I'm sorry. One example about students enrolling in 2 different places, we do that right now. For example, with one of our 4-year institution, our nursing students from day 1 can enroll with us and enroll with a 4-year. So within, for example, 3 years or 4 years, they both get a 2-year degree and a 4-year degree. So they
Right.
are a student in both institutions at the same time. Another example is also a nursing degree. We had a 4-year institution that does not have a nursing program. So what we do is we say, why not partner? We have the nursing faculty and nursing facility. Why not we partner and you can say that you have a nursing and the students can actually enroll in both institutions. So that way we don't have to duplicate equipment, facility, which is expensive. And the student still meet, we still meet the student's need. So I think as time goes by, the collaboration between 2-year and 4-year needs to be even stronger. The old days of I create mine, Iowa Wesleyans create theirs, it just duplicates expenses. And technology is expensive. The 15 community colleges, we actually have a consortium of online classes.
Yeah.
So that if there's anything that I don't have, our students can actually take a class and be accepted by us, and it could be taught by DMAC or Kirkwood or anywhere else. So that is ongoing. The only thing is we are still constrained to a certain extent by accreditation agencies.
Oh, sure.
They still require us to follow certain guidelines. So that is something to work with. And also the Department of Education, they also have certain things that they require. And this is after years of the policy in place. So we may want to move fast. The thing is that can other entity allow us to move as fast?
Yeah, that's another great point. Go ahead. Sorry, President Plunkett.
I was going to say, we certainly, that's one of the reasons it took some time to figure out how to put together this partnership, because you're looking at a 2-year publicly funded community college and a 4-year privately supported liberal arts university. We can't merge those. We looked into that. You simply can't. You can't merge the financials for 2 entities like that. But through this separate 501c3 nonprofit, we will have a standalone board that will oversee the partnership, but the 2 institutions will maintain their own accreditation, their own trustees, their own presidents, their own programs. But I do think that a lot of those points, Dr. Wee mentioned the online consortium, because we're now part of a partnership with the community college where our students will now have access to that, which is, again, opening those doors a little bit wider for more students to have more access. And Vanessa, I think on the question of the a la carte, which is really interesting idea, it's potentially more feasible for perhaps older adult students who really, maybe their families, they have children, they've got a few college credits, but they never finished and they want to complete. They're not going to be looking to play football on the football team. They're not looking for that campus experience. But the complexities are so complicated. Who awards the final degree? If you're not affiliated with a specific institution, who establishes the credit requirements to get that degree that you're seeking? Who awards the degree? So I think it would require a lot of, again, not just the infrastructure that Regan mentioned, but sort of oversight of what are the requirements for a nursing degree? And if you're getting it with credits from 3 or 4 institutions, what does that look like?
Right. I mean, I think part of that, those complexities that I wanted to ask about has to do with funding. Obviously, financial stuff is a huge deal these days. And I'm wondering how the tuition would work with that, or if any of you have thoughts on whether campuses would be hesitant to do that because you don't want to necessarily split tuition, with other institutions or sell as you might say, a course, rather than like having someone entirely enrolled for a semester.
Certainly one of the complexities. Again, when you're combining a community college with a 4-year, it's a little bit different because you're not really competing so much as you are collaborating and opening doorways for the 2-year students to move into the 4-year. But when you start, Dr. Wee mentioned that education is not operate in isolation, which is very true, but you're also still going to find your private four-year entities or even your public ones, they're drawing a little circle around themselves. And you, especially with the financial challenges these days, to be giving away part of the revenue that you might have gotten otherwise, there's going to be some resistance to that. And it is tricky. I think the colleges of the Fenway, I think, has kind of similarly priced institutions. And so I believe they just can kind of cross-register, and the tuition is sort of the same as you would have paid at your home institution. I'm not sure of that, but I do think it gets a lot trickier if you have two institutions that are very differently priced. And you start saying, okay, if you go to this institution, you're going to pay their per credit price. It's very tricky.
I just have a question just for clarity. Like we talk about degrees, just so that everybody who's listening knows, Dr. Wee, for example, like if you get an associate's degree, you get both, and then you transfer, you get your associate's degree, correct, from the community college, and then you transfer to a four-year and can earn that degree as well. Am I right in that?
It is correct. In fact, many of our four-year colleagues actually will take everything, because of the agreement. So when you earn the two-year degree, you earn it. And then when you proceed to earn your four-year, you earn your four-year degree. We also have students who transfer without completing with us. So for example, they may transfer to Iowa Wesleyan, and they are not quite done with the two-year degree, but they have a few credits left. And our agreement with Iowa Wesleyan is agreeable. Iowa Wesleyan might just say, you know what, after you have completed these degrees, let's transfer those back to NICC to allow NICC to confer you a two-year degree. So we call that reverse transfer.
Right.
And we have done that. And so that the credential, as we call it, degree is part of credential, the student has it. And what we find in research is when people complete something, it is a momentum for the next one. When people does not complete something, it's easier to just stop. So when you hear about completion, there is research behind it. We want people to do that. Even for our students, sometimes they have to, what we call stop out. People say your student drop out. No, they don't drop out. Life sometimes requires them to take a pause. So they stop out. We keep in touch with them. And when they're ready, they come back. Over 70% of our students work at least half or more, half-time or more every week. They have obligations. It's very different from a typical four-year student. So we have to understand where they are. So when we talk about enrolling, retention, and completion, we have to take a look at that person as a whole. But definitely completion is very, very important.
Right. I mean, I think one question I have is we're talking about this increase in collaboration and cooperation. It seems like I do read about new collaborations every day, new partnerships, transfer agreements, and things like that. So are we still looking at a pretty competitive higher education landscape, or like nationally and locally, or do you think that it's becoming less so because of this cooperation?
I think it is competitive, as President Plunkett said, because you sometimes have fewer bodies. And that's a reality.
Right.
We try to be very affordable to our students, but we still have bills to pay. We have a lot of what we call career technical education equipments. We have a John Deere program, the only one in Iowa. And those machines are not inexpensive. We're talking about several $100,000. Without the support of the John Deere Corporation, we wouldn't be able to do it. So I think in terms of bodies, in terms of enrollment, is competitive. But what Iowa Wesleyan and Southeastern is doing is, how can we lower the cost? How can partnership lower it? So for us, when we partner with our businesses, partner with our nonprofit, partner with our K-12, it's not only making sure that education is there, but how can we make it sustainable? Because once it's not sustainable, then we have an issue, because I cannot print money, right? And so that is still something we have to realize. And so how do you make it affordable, but still pay your bill? I mean, every time the utility company, for example, I'm just making it up, raise their rate by 5%, we have to pay that 5%, just like everybody else, you know? And when you look at, for example, recently the gas prices went up, we also have to do that. And when we have a cold winter, the use of heating, it goes up. Healthcare is a big thing. I think President Plunkett knows healthcare cost is very expensive. So regardless of whether you have 10 students or 20 students, certain costs are fixed. How do we deal with that? And in rural Iowa, whenever an institution, or anywhere, I should say, when an institution is no longer there, the economic impact in that area is huge. I mean, I can imagine, for example, President Plunkett, if your institution were to go away, what is the economic gap that is created in the southeast corner of Iowa?
Yeah, and we looked at that. That's one of the really unique aspects of our partnership, is the extent to which it's not just focused on academics, but on the region's economy, because we, together with Southeastern, the two of us may have more than a $200 million impact on the region. And you may be aware that the hospital in Mount Pleasant, Henry County Health Center, has just entered into a almost identical arrangement that we have with Great River Medical Center in Burlington. It's a kind of a, it's not a merger, but it's kind of a shared partnership with some shared services. And when the president of the Henry County Health Center and I talk to each other, we say, this is a rural part of a rural state where instead of saying, oh, we're closing our higher education institution and we're closing our hospital, instead of that, we've said, how can we partner to strengthen the hospital and strengthen the educational system and strengthen the region's economy? And if you look at those two options, closing a hospital and a university versus keeping them open and growing them, it seems like the choice is obvious. But interestingly enough, Southeastern and Iowa Wesleyan at one point were a form of competitor. We're two very different institutions, but we used to be competing for some of the same students in the region. And when we finally were able to sit down and really learn to trust one another and develop this partnership, we realized we don't need to be competing with each other. We need to be helping to grow enrollment at both institutions and support the region's economy. And so that's what we feel makes this kind of unique, because it's not just about academic pathways, it's about pathways into the workforce as well.
Yeah, that's actually leads right into a question I had, was whether having these cooperations and these collaborations increases enrollment. Does it, instead of taking away, just being able to use that as a sort of selling point, boost enrollment, or what's the impact?
We based this on an expectation that it will increase enrollment. That's part of our financial model. And there's two pieces to that. I think Dr. Ash at Southeastern believes that through this partnership and the SIHEA, the Southeast Iowa Higher Education Alliance, he believes more high school students can be encouraged to pursue an education past high school. So that's more enrollment into his institution. And then we believe by making the pricing competitive with other sort of four-year state institutions, the average over the 4 years between SCC and Iowa Wesleyan will be much more affordable, that we can then, again, go from that 15% of SCC students that go on to something, bring it up to the 30%. And we'll see, we're just rolling this out. This fall will be the first fall, and probably it'll be another year before we fully see it, but we're offering, scholarships from both institutions, doing everything we can to support the accessibility. And I'm sure Regan would reiterate that accessibility and affordability is really probably number one in the minds of students.
Yeah, I would say number one is affordability more than ever, especially at a state school. It's a little different, but students are paying more of their tuition than ever. And especially after COVID-19, I know the university is struggling financially, but students are really having to make a decision of, do I get an education or not? Because it is expensive, and we know that the deficits that are happening at universities will probably fall on students almost entirely. So I think that that does this partnership increase enrollment is all about if it's making it more affordable. So I'm so excited to hear that it is.
Right. Well, and go ahead, Dr. Wee, sorry.
I think one of the things that we try to do is tap into the population that sometimes do not engage in education. So for example, one of the pilot project we did in Dubuque targets single parents because many of them do not have access to childcare. So they can't do a lot of things. So we work with the city, Greater Dubuque Development Corporation, the Community Foundation of Greater Dubuque, and some of the nonprofits. And we went and connected with the single parents. So when they are in training with us, their child or children will be in a certified childcare environment. Mm-hmm. Don't have to worry about it. And when they're done with the training, you take them home. We also work with our businesses to actually work with these people. Once they get the skill, how do we interview and get them into workforce? And we know that to afford childcare right off the bat is not easy. So we actually have a pool of funding from all the partners that for the first year when they get into the job, we will subsidize childcare. So sometimes growing enrollment is not about recruiting from the existing population, but actually looking at the underserved population. How do we get them so that they can take care of their family on their own? The other population that we work with, also a pilot and has gone so well, we are trying to duplicate another area, is connecting with young people who drop out of high school. Mm-hmm. When they drop out of high school, really the path is not that great economically. So we work with a local school district and we hire 2 colleagues, and their job is to connect with those that drop out. Why are you dropping out? And we try to get them back into the system. If they're still young enough, how do we get them back into the high school? If they're already old, they come to us and we work with them on what we call the GED, get them. And then from there, get them into another program. It has worked really well because some of these young people, they do want to come back. But once they drop out, they didn't know how to. They're waiting for somebody to say, here is the way. So as a community college, it's not just looking for something new, but what's already here that is not as engaged. How do we go to them? That's why I keep saying meeting people where they are. How do we go to them and say, can we partner with you? We don't have all the answers, but together I think the future is brighter. It's a lot of work, but I can tell you the results that we have been seeing is very encouraging.
Well, that's awesome. I just want to take a quick second to remind folks that if you do have any questions, go ahead and send those in the chat and I will ask them. But I wanted to ask Regan, I mean, do you see your friends and peers, are more of them coming through agreements to the campus, or are more of them looking at these really specific collaborations, even ones where like one university to another might be offering a law degree or a nursing degree or some program that's not offered at UI or at Iowa State or anything else like that?
Truthfully, no, it's not something I've heard students talking about. Part of that is probably because the University of Iowa is like a top program in so many things that students who want a degree from there almost always can get what they need. So it might be a little different than other schools in that way. But I do think that we're moving in this direction I think this is an early conversation, and I think the reason students aren't talking about it is because no one has told them that that's an option. So I think it's something people would be really excited about. Something I've been thinking about a lot that kind of relates is right now I've worked really hard to make textbook shipping accessible to people in other countries, to make sure that people living in countries that have internet restrictions can get access to our interface is called ICON. So we have students taking classes in California and in China, in Taiwan, and that is something that has seriously never happened before, but I think that it will continue after. I'll be curious to see how it continues, I guess. And maybe students will be more excited than ever to be on campus and have that community, like Christine said earlier. But I do think that, I know I am, but I know that there will be students who we have this like online degree option. And so I think that as we move towards a more online learning format, undeniably, so because we've learned so much about what we can do, those kind of this kind of a la carte option becomes way more accessible, and like it helps students in a way different way than it could if you were just living in a dorm, going to Iowa, having that experience. It could be a really different experience.
Right. I'm wondering if the demographic shifts that President Plunkett and Dr. Wee have talked about in Iowa and that are predicted for the future will increase the partnership and the student demand, I guess, for those partnership options going forward. Do you guys have thoughts about that?
I think one thing the demographic shifts will do is, and it's already evident, is increase really the necessity for small private institutions to find a way to partner. There simply are going to be too many institutions for the number of high school graduates that there will be, not just in Iowa, nationwide. And already just about every week, maybe it's a little less now, but I just read about another college in Massachusetts. It's a 250-year-old college in Worcester, Massachusetts, that just announced its closing. Just can't keep up with enrollment requirements, and COVID has made it that much harder. And the future demographically doesn't indicate that improving. So I do think the demographic shifts will necessitate more partnerships. Whether the demographic shifts will push students to be more interested in that kind of cross enrollment, I'm not sure. It's really hard. I think, again, the dividing line will be the students who now really want to do online learning, want to do distance learning. Those will be the ones that it's most appropriate for. The students who crave that campus environment will continue to crave that. And I think that they're gonna continue to seek that out.
Yeah.
In the community college environment, besides the traditional students, we also work a lot with our businesses for upskilling.
All right.
This environment is very competitive. As I said, we are no longer competing in Iowa, we're competing globally. So many of our companies are always looking for upscaling opportunity. So when we talk about the a la carte option, it is definitely very much alive in the business industry. Day in and day out, we would be talking with our companies, and they would say, well, we need training X. Can you get it for us? And we would go and do that. Mm-hmm. So depending on their needs, we would procure that. And many of the companies decide to come to Iowa because they know that the community colleges in their area can help them grow. Mm-hmm. So the upscaling of their workforce is very important. And I can tell you that for our college, bringing training on site so that they don't have to go anywhere is an option. So not only are we catering to their needs, we make it easy for them to say, okay, if you have one shift that is just coming off, go to this classroom and get training. So we actually put training on wheels to a certain extent. And for some of the smaller companies, they just cannot afford to pay for the entire training. So how can we actually aggregate a group of the businesses and say, we have a training for all of you? Same training for all the different companies. So that is something that we are definitely doing more of.
Yeah, wonderful. I kind of thinking about the idea of cooperation, allowing campuses to survive, as President Plunkett sort of mentioned, and thrive going forward. So your campus, obviously was able to establish a partnership where you both maintain yourselves, though, as independent institutions. Do you see, institutions that are in survival mode combining into one? Do you see that happening where they join and instead of two, there's now just one institution and there being fewer going forward?
I think that has happened already in some cases, and I certainly see that maybe a larger, more stable institution. As you may remember, we pursued that possibility with an out-of-state entity down in Florida for about 8 or 9 months. We did some due diligence on that. In the end, in our case, we decided from both sides it was not in the best interests. For one thing, it would have been a merger. We would have lost our name, our 180-year-old identity a little bit would have been changed, but also we found that we would have been classified as a Florida university, and therefore we would have lost the Iowa tuition grant, which is a $6,000 at least grant for all of our Iowa students. And I just said, we're serving Iowa students here largely, and we can't really do that. And our alumni were not happy about the name potentially changing. And in the end, when we sat down and talked to Southeastern, it made so much more sense that's where, again, the conversation started steering away from just saving the institution to one of how can we strengthen both of ourselves and the regional economy. But I would absolutely say that there will be mergers probably, and I think there already are. I can't name any off the top of my head, but I think there have been some.
Right. In that happening, just given the demographic changes, though, do you think that is harmful to higher education as a whole? Or do you think the more options, the better? Or do any three of you have thoughts on that?
Well, I think it's a sad outcome when the numbers of private colleges are being reduced because, as Regan mentioned, I can use my original home state is Vermont. And when I left Vermont 6 years ago, I think there were something like 25 private colleges. And just in the last 3 or 4 years, I think at least 7 or 8 of them have closed. And I can tell you every single one of those served a unique niche. I mean, every private entity does, whether it's an academic program they have that no one else has, or a culture, if it's a farm school where students are doing farming. I mean, there's so many unique niches that as that number gets winnowed down and these mergers occur, I think that's a sad outcome. But I also think, I've been in some of the national conferences the last couple of years with college presidents, and they're really saying small private institutions that are not looking forward and finding some new way of conducting their business, whether it's a merger or a partnership or a collaboration or an affiliation of some sort, they're probably going to be in trouble given the population declines in that age group.
Sure. Do you think that instead of closing entire schools or merging entire schools, institutions are becoming more efficient by closing just programs or by using these partnerships and capitalizing on perhaps a bigger institution's more established program and just allowing students to transfer there or not? Is that happening more?
I think efficiency is a huge piece of this. I'll just give 2 quick examples. We have just finalized our first 2 shared positions, and Dr. Wee will recognize this as one of the very challenging positions these days. Expensive and challenging is Title IX coordinator. It's becoming increasingly regulated, difficult. So we are hiring a shared Title IX and diversity director for our 2 institutions. That's a big savings to split that into one position between 2 institutions. The second one we're doing serves not only a financial benefit, but to bring our campuses together, which is a shared director of student activities. And so that'll be 1 director for 2 campuses. We'll provide some graduate assistants to work under that person. But again, it's financial savings, so you've got the efficiency, and it's also how do we bring our campuses together through that one position. So efficiency is going to be a piece of that puzzle.
Yeah, great. Well, I think that actually takes up most of our time here, but I'm so thankful to everybody for being here today. Tomorrow, I just want to note, is the last day of our in-depth week on higher education. We have 2 panels tomorrow. Our 11 a.m. discussion should be just so interesting because we're going to sit down with a panel of students just to hear about their experiences this year. I know they've been unprecedented, and so that will be, I think, really fascinating. And then our noon discussion, we're going to talk to some administrators and sort of technology gurus on the campus to talk about what it was like to move everything online last spring and what this year has been like from that point of view, offering sort of a hybrid curriculum. So the Gazette's full annual Iowa Ideas Conference is October 14th and 15th. This year it'll again be virtual and it will be free. It's going to span a whole range of tracks from education to environment to policy to healthcare. Again, it's free with registration, which is now open at iowaideas.com. Our keynote speakers for that main event are David Gould, who's a visiting professor for the University of Iowa's Public Policy Center, and also Peggy Whitson, who's a retired NASA astronaut, and she's a current collaborator with SpaceX. So that should all be pretty fun too. Thanks again for joining us today. I hope you learned some stuff. I know I did.
Thank you.
Thanks. Yep. Bye.
Bye.